The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mokgweetsi Eric Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Mokgweetsi Eric Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor and privilege for me to address the General Assembly for the first time in my capacity as the President of the Republic of Botswana, after assuming office on 1st April of this year. I succeeded former President, Lieutenant General Dr. Kama Ian Kama, who retired at the end of his term of office. This was the fifth time that Botswana witnessed a smooth transfer of power since her independence in 1966. Allow me to join other delegations in paying tribute to the former Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Kofi Annan, who passed away on the 18th of August, 2018. Mr. Annan will be remembered as an international statesman, an icon who devoted his entire life towards serving humanity. Mr. President, let me also join other delegations in congratulating you on your election as President of the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly. It is particularly noteworthy that the President of the General Assembly is a lady this time, who's held in this esteemed position since the founding of she's the fourth woman who's held in a high position since the founding of our world body 73 years ago, and the first woman from the Latin America and Caribbean region. I'd like to assure you of the full support and cooperation of my delegation as you discharge your mandate and wish you success. Let me also seize this opportunity to thank His Excellency Mr. Lajak, who competently presided over the deliberations of the 72nd session last year. I also wish to thank our Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Guterres, for his outstanding leadership and stewardship of this organization. I wish to principally commend him for the reforms that he has initiated, which are aimed at improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the United Nations. Mr. President, my delegation welcomes the theme of the General Assembly debate of the 73rd session of the UN General Assembly, namely making the United Nations relevant to all people, global leadership and shared responsibilities for peaceful, equitable and sustainable societies. We are particularly pleased to note that it builds on last year's theme, which focused on people and also emphasized the nexus between peace and a decent life for all on the planet. This evidently shows the United Nations' steadfast commitment to ensuring sustainable development for all. Clearly, the principle of leaving no one behind should remain our long-term aspiration. This is a clarion call for us to end extreme poverty and ensure provision of quality education, healthcare, infrastructure, housing, and employment for all. Mr. President, I am pleased that the SDGs report of 2018 indicates that more people are living healthier lives than it was the case a decade ago. That notwithstanding, we should be reminded that much more still needs to be done to achieve prosperity for all. This in view of the fact that an estimated 783 million people live in extreme poverty and 2.3 billion people still lack access to basic level of sanitation services, while 4 billion people are without social protection. It is therefore apparent that none of us, whether big or small, can overcome these gigantic development challenges alone. Consequently, we need to act together to strengthen multilateralism as well as to honor and implement commitments made by the General Assembly and global partnerships for sustainable development. It is also imperative that the global community should continue to support individual countries given their unique development challenges. For instance, while Botswana is classified as an upper middle income country, it is still confronted by many development challenges comparable to that of the less developed countries. However, we are reassured by the words of the UN Secretary General, who when he opined that the United Nations, and I quote, stands ready to work with all member states to make the Sustainable Development Goals a reality for everyone, everywhere, close quote. In view of the development challenges facing my country, I wish to reiterate our appeal for continued support in human capital, infrastructure, and capacity development for the private sector and technology transfer. Mr. President, on sustainable development, Botswana reaffirms a commitment to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To this end, we have aligned our National Vision 2036 to this global agenda. At the regional level, we are also pleased that the African Union Agenda 2063 and the Southern Africa Development Community Integration Agenda is aligned to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. What is common about these development agendas is that they are both aimed at eradicating poverty and creating inclusive, prosperous, and peaceful societies. In this respect, we are pleased to note that extreme poverty continues to decline globally, even though we still have a long way to go, given that 35% of the African population, or a whopping 395 million people, still live in abject poverty. As we begin the third year of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, my government remains steadfast in her resolve to improve the material and social well-being of our population. Our National Development Agenda places people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership at the heart of sustainable development. In this regard, our National Vision 2036 is anchored on 4 pillars of sustainable economic development, human and social development, sustainable environment, and governance, peace, and security. In addition, we have 6 national priorities that are aligned to our national vision pillars, namely developing diversified sources of economic growth, human capital development, social development, sustainable use of national resources, consolidation of good governance, and strengthening of national security and implementation of an effective M&E system. In this way, our sustainable development pathway strikes a balance between social, human, economic, environmental, and governance dimensions. The implementation of National Vision 2036 and the 11th National Development Plan is underpinned by a robust monitoring and evaluation system to ensure effective delivery of goals and our aspirations. Additionally, we have established a National Steering Committee to effectively coordinate implementation and to monitor the SDGs. We have also developed Botswana's SDGs Roadmap, a guide to implementation of SDG goals, covering the period 2017 to 2036. Mr. President, my government has adopted a comprehensive and inclusive approach to the implementation of the monitoring of Sustainable Development Goals. This was aimed at ensuring broad ownership and leadership at local, community, and national levels to break silos across the development spectrum through forging strategic partnerships between government, academia, civil society organizations, community-based organizations, development partners, private sector, non-state actors, and the UN system. In pursuit of these goals and aspirations, we have prioritized economic diversification, sustainable economic growth, employment creation, and investment in human capital for building a prosperous and inclusive society. In particular, focus is on our young people, who constitute 60% of the population of Botswana. To this end, our ultimate goal is to attain universal access to pre-primary, primary, and secondary education. We are also expanding access to tertiary, technical and vocational education and training. In addition, we are developing a national employment policy whose objectives are to assist Botswana to achieve gainful and productive employment and decent work for all. Above all, the government of Botswana has developed several policies, programs, and strategies such as the Economic Diversification Drive, Citizen Economic Empowerment Policy, Youth Empowerment Scheme, and the Youth Development Fund to support sustainable economic development and employment creation. To ensure that development is a benefit for all, my government continues to make substantial investments in the provision of healthcare, decent housing and shelter, through interventions such as the Treat All strategy, prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, self-help housing scheme, and destitute housing program. Additionally, the government provides social protection to vulnerable groups such as children, youth, young persons, persons living with disabilities, and the elderly through the out-of-school children policy, orphan care program, and the old age pension scheme. Other development interventions aimed at increasing access to economic and social opportunities include poverty eradication, women and youth empowerment, and national policy on gender and development. Furthermore, we have prioritized investments in research and development, science, technology, and innovation in order to transform Botswana into a high-income status nation and knowledge-based economy. Investment in information communication technology is undertaken to promote growth and economic diversification and to support e-government services and innovation in the economy. Mr. President, we note that the implementation of the ambitious 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development faces immense resource and capacity constraints. In this respect, we welcome the efforts of the UN to address these challenges through the adoption of General Assembly Resolution 72/279 on responding to the United Nations Development System in May this year. This resolution is vital in that it aims to support countries in their efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is our firm conviction that strengthened United Nations country teams and reinvigorated resident coordinator systems will contribute significantly to the achievement of the SDGs. Equally, Botswana welcomes the signing of the African Union United Nations framework for the implementation of Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 to ensure effective coordination, execution, monitoring, and reporting on these two instruments. This coordination will hopefully ensure that there is no duplication of efforts, thus allowing for the effective use of already limited resources. On human rights, Mr. President, Botswana remains committed to the promotion and protection of human rights, democracy, good governance, and the rule of law, which are critical to sustainable development, prosperity, and a peaceful society. In this connection, we continue to support efforts to fight impunity and the principle of responsibility to protect populations from atrocities such as genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. In this regard, we reaffirm our full support of the United Nations Human Rights Council and the International Criminal Court. This year, the ICC achieved a milestone when it commemorated the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statutes that founded this court. Since its formation in 2002, the International Criminal Court has contributed significantly to the strengthening of the international criminal justice system through prosecution of grave international crimes. On international peace and security, Botswana remains deeply concerned about the protracted conflicts in Afghanistan, in Mali, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. It is estimated that over the past decade, violent conflicts have led to forced displacement of over 68.5 million people. Studies show that conflicts contribute to the rise in slums, hunger, and food insecurity, thereby worsening any humanitarian crisis. We therefore urge all parties to the conflicts to uphold their obligation to protect civilians and humanitarian personnel in accordance with international human rights and humanitarian law. We also wish to stress that dialogue and peaceful resolution of conflicts are critical to the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. President, we wish to commend the SG for initiating reforms in the peace and security pillar aimed at strengthening the United Nations capacities in conflict prevention and resolution, mediation, peacekeeping, peacemaking, post-conflict reconstruction and development, peace building, and sustaining peace. To bolster international peace-making efforts, African leaders have committed themselves to fund 25% of peace support operations in Africa by 2021 and silencing the guns by 2020. I therefore wish to applaud the regional organizations for their commitment to this noble cause. Madam President, corruption. As a global community, we need to address the problems of illicit financial flows, money laundering, and corruption, which are hemorrhaging the resources needed to implement the SDGs. SDG 16 calls for, among others, sustainable reduction of corruption and bribery in all their forms, strengthening the recovery and return of stolen assets, and developing effective, accountable, and transparent institutions at all levels. In conclusion, I wish to reaffirm Botswana's commitment to the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter and to the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our actions should be bold and transformative as we build a better future for our nations and succeeding generations. We should stand firm towards our mantra of leaving no one behind. Let us not be hesitant in demonstrating global leadership, collective responsibility, and collaborative partnerships involving all countries and peoples of the world. The future truly is in our hands. I thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Botswana for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the Head of State.